بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. أخبرنا محمد بن يحيى قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى ونفعنا الله بعلمه وعلمكم آمين. أخبرنا محمد بن يحيى قال أخبرنا يزيد بن هارون. So Yazid ibn Harun, powerhouse. Okay, so he is of the key powerhouses and thiqat, right? He says قال أخبرنا حميد. This is حميد الطويل, right? One of the key students of Anas. So notice how short his chain is. So this is a very short chain. So our author, there's one, two, three, four people between him and the Prophet ﷺ. That's extremely short chain for that kind of time, right? Partly because look, Sayyidina Anas. So we mentioned with Sayyidina Anas that the shortest chains are going to be from, like say, Imam Malik to Zuhri to Anas. There's two people between Imam Malik and the Prophet ﷺ. Zuhri, Anas, the Prophet ﷺ. Or Nafi' ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ. But now we're not on the time of Sayyidina Imam Malik. We're way later, right? We're way later. So here it's a very, very short chain. So if you think about it, Imam Malik will narrate from a Zuhri here, and then Imam Malik is here. So here, our author is his Sheikh is narrated from Yazid ibn Harun. That's one, two, three, four. It's very, very short chain, extremely short chain. So I believe Bukhari has some thulathiyat. Bukhari has some hadiths that are like that. They are just three people in the chain. And they're all going to be Anas or Wathila ibn Asqa. Right? Same kind of concept. So this is a super sahih chain. So he's going to say here, where is this hadith? 58. Bukhari, Nasa'i, Abu Dawood. Muslim, etc. So, and the madar is going to be either Yazid ibn Harun or Humayd. Wallahu a'lam. Humayd al-Tawil. And the Rasulullah ra'a nukhamatan. Fu'ala is the pattern that is used for a big thing that comes off, a small thing that comes off a big thing. In fiqh, we're talking about ghusala. The ghusala is the water that is dripping, that it comes off something that was washed. Right? You were washing some cloth that had najasa on it, and the water that came off. That's the ghusala. Nuhata, the chips that come off something you're chipping away at a wall, that's called nuhata, right? Yeah, fu'ala. So here's a person, and they spit phlegm, right? So that's called, there's a whole person, and the small thing that comes off the big thing, that's called nuhama, right? Phlegm. And phlegm, Allahu A'lam, just a side part, the word phlegm, like many medical terms, is not English, as far as I know. I have an app here about etymology. I'm pretty sure the word phlegm is from balgham. It is not actually. So either balgham is from a shared source. Where is this word? So the word phlegm. Notice it has a G in it. So it says late. It says late 14th century, from Old French flume, phlegma, from Latin phlegma. And it says here that it's Proto-Indo-European. Wallahu alam. So it's possible that there's a shared word that balgham comes from. Right? If you look in the Arabic dictionaries, they might say Farisi Mu'arrab, that it's a Persian word that became Arabic, but it's also possible that's actually Arabic, right? And Allahu alam. So he said, في قبلة المسجد, in the direction of the Qibla, فحكها بيده. So he scratched off with his hand. فرؤي في وجهه شدة ذلك عليه. He found it very, very difficult. Not because it was disgusting, but because of the offense that he felt towards the Qibla. فقال إن العبد إذا قام يصلي فإنما يناجي ربه. أو فإنما ربه فيما بينه وبين القبلة. So either he's speaking privately to his cherishing Lord, or he said his cherishing Lord is between him and the Qibla. فإذا بزق وبصق وبسق وبزق أحدكم فليبصق وزق وزق وسق عن يساره. Right? We spoke about this word buzaq, right? Before, is that the scene is become affected by the letters around it. So it's becoming heavy, and then it's becoming strange. You can say busaq, busaq, or buzaq, right? And you can probably also say buzaq with a za as well. Wallahu alam. So when you spit, then let somebody spit to his left, off to his left, أو تحت قدمه, or under his foot, أو يقول هكذا, right? Or he should do such a thing, move in such a way. وبزق بثوبه, في ثوبه, we spat into his cloth. وَدَلَكَ بَعْضُهُ بِبَعْضٍ, and he rubbed one part against the other, right? So now we're in a masjid. The masjid has sand on it. So spitting on the floor and turning it over is not the end of the world. Right? Obviously, it'd be very different if it's a carpet. So, right. It also tells us that phlegm is not najis, because if it was najis, you have to wash it. Right? So here the Prophet is saying this is disrespectful. Right? You're praying and you spit in front of you towards the qibla. It's pretty disrespectful. Right? Okay. حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال قرأت على عبد الله بن نافع. Right? So notice the later scholars, generally speaking, are very, very nitpicky about how exactly they studied. Right? We find Nasa'i, for example. Nasa'i had a bit of an altercation with one of his teachers, and he wasn't allowed in the majlis. So he used to stand in the majlis, sit on the other side of the majlis, like where the teacher couldn't see him. So he wouldn't say, I read to the teacher, because he didn't. Or the teacher read to me. He said, it was read to the teacher while I'm listening. He's trying to be very, very careful. Like, my friend was reading to the teacher and I was listening. That's exactly how it was conveyed. So here, you find usually at the end of the chain, you'll find these. Later on in time, they're going to add things like dates and places, right? And then later on, you're going to find all the sama'at are like that with a register. So when it says, for example, we heard, there's actually a register, right? So it's going to be like in the year 600, we were in this masjid and we read from chapter this to this of this book with this sheikh, and so was so, and these are the people who were here, right? That's called the sama'at, like a register of who was actually there. Very, very specific, right? Who is it? Ibn Asakir has a totally epic book called, I think it's called Al-Arba'in Al-Buldaniyah. So it's 40 hadiths in 40 different places. So he says, I narrate this hadith from my sheikh, and this sheikh told me this hadith in the front of the Kaaba, in front of the Masjid Nabawi, in front of Jerusalem, in Balkh, in this place, in the 40 different places. Right? So he's telling you exactly where he heard that teacher, and he might give the date as well. Right? In the year this. Right? You find things like that. Sometimes even with a book. Like Al-Farraz, Farra, he has a book on Ma'ani al-Quran, like grammatical and linguistic analysis of the Quran. And so Shimarri, I think his name is, or Shimarri, I can't remember his name exactly. So he says, I sat and this is the dictation that Farra gave us from this date to this date, that we met every Monday and Wednesday in the masjid from this date and this date. Right, so like how old the person was when that happened, what was his relationship to the person, when did it happen, why did it happen, etc. Right, you see all the lot of details. When you go further up the chain, you get less details. Right, was it exactly that he heard, or that it was via, or is it this or that? It's less usually. So he says, حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال قرأت على عبد الله بن نافع. Now I'm not sure who this is. This could be the son of Nafi'. I'm not sure. I don't know. وحدثني مطرف بن عبد الله عن مالك. Right, so this is so wa means and. So it's going to be a new chain. Okay? So you might put a little ha here and say wa, right? So he says محمد قال حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال قرأت على عبد الله بن نافع, right? Wa, and on top of that حدثني مطرف ابن عبد الله. And I'm not sure where the chains are meeting here. I'm pretty sure the chain meets at Malik. I'm pretty sure it's like this: Muhammad ibn Yahya قرأت على عبد الله بن نافع. And then he says وحدثني مطرف ابن عبد الله. So here's another chain: مطرف ibn Abdullah from Malik. I'm not sure where the madar of the hadith is here. 1 second. Uh, can somebody have a look? Because there might be other chains here. I'm not quite sure. Can somebody have a look in Abu Dawood or Tirmidhi? Just see where it merges. Because usually, what he's doing here is this is called when he says wa, that means a new chain. I can't quite see. I would imagine it merges at Malik, but I'm not 100%. Anyway, this is a famous hadith that's in the Muwatta of Imam Malik, right? So Imam Malik narrates from Ishaq ibn Abdullah ibn Abi Talha, from Humayda, okay, female, from Humayda bint Ubayd ibn Rifa'a, from another female, and Kabsha binti Ka'b ibn Malik, right? And so many of you are familiar with the scholar um, Dr. Akram Nadawi in England. So he has a book, which is a really important book for local masajid. He has a book on women hadith narrators, right? So he wrote this book called Al-Muhaddithat, which is like a 50-volume encyclopedia of female hadith narrators, right? Really, really long. Um, and so he summarized that in English into a 1-volume small book, which basically talks about famous female hadith narrators and how women are important in spreading sacred knowledge, right? So here's an example of that, right? You get to the chain, and it says Humayda binti Ubayd ibn Rifa'a from another female. وكانت تحت ابن أبي قتادة. So the misogynist was just slapped in the face and said, haha, women are in control of you because they're teaching you a religion, right? The fight between the genders, who's controlling who, right? Obviously, this is a stupid paradigm to say who's controlling who and who's fighting who, because it's not a fight, okay? But then it does say something else. So he's saying it's a totally different chain. Yeah. So that's Al-Qa'nabi. That's the same teacher as Bukhari. That's the Qa'nabi that narrates from Malik. But I'm pretty sure it's like that anyway. That basically between our author and Malik, there's two people, right? So here, Muhammad ibn Yahya, I narrate from Abdullah ibn Nafi' from Malik. And so here, basically here, wa. So this stops at Malik. And Haddathin Mutarrif, so here he had just one person. So he has either two people or one person between him. Wallahu alam. Yeah. So Ma'an ibn Isa al-Qazzaz. So so these are all. So can you see how many people are like every hadith of Malik is narrated by like 200 people. So and these are all famous people. So here's Mutarrif, here's Ma'an ibn Isa al-Qazzaz, Abdullah al-Qa'nabi. So Qa'nabi's so Abu Dawood has received the Muwatta and inserted it in his Sunan. Right? That's what he did. Right? So that's why his chain is the self same. Basically, it's basically the Muwatta. Right? Bukhari is the same thing from Qa'nabi. But basically, everybody is studying with the students or the grand students of Malik, right? Because he's such an important person. Okay, so anyway, so the hadith is mutawatir, basically. It's mutawatir from Imam Malik, right? So these chains become pointless at a certain point, if that makes sense, right? They're not pointless because there are mistakes, right? Daraqutni has a book, for example, where he compares different versions of hadiths from Imam Malik and showing where people have made mistakes from Malik, right? Or Imam Malik himself might make a mistake, right? Where there's a hadith that other people narrate, that he narrates, and it's a mistake. It's possible as well. Very unlikely. So, but there's a certain point where it's just khalas, that's the muwatta. So when we say it's in Abu Dawood, what does it mean? It means it's mutawatir from Abu Dawood. That's one of the key significance of these books. Is a book has become so famous that now so many people are narrating it from that author that I don't really care what the source is. It's not very relevant to me. Like if I have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people narrating the same hadith, I really don't care what the chain is between me and him, because khalas is mutawatir now, right? Does that make sense? But it's not always like that. So, for example, with the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, we say, oh, it's in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. In reality, the Musnad of Imam Ahmad has reached us through his son Abdullah, and from him Al-Qati'i. So, in reality, all chains for us Musnad Ahmad go through Al-Qati'i to Musnad Ahmad to Imam Ahmad, and then the chain starts. But we kind of don't really mention that, right? So it's not actually mutawatir from Imam Ahmad, right? But with Abu Dawood, it's basically mutawatir, like 4 or 5 different narrations from of Abu Dawood. Nasa'i, many narrations. Allahu A'lam. Muwatta, countless narrations. Right? Slightly different differences here and there, but basically the same hadith. It's this hadith of Imam Malik. Okay, so anyway, we were saying during in the fight between the two genders, this hadith has proven that women control. Because look, there's a woman writing from another woman, and there we go. What does it say here? وَكَانَتْ تَحْتَ بْنِ أَبِي قَتَادَةَ. What does that say? How would you translate that? So Kabsha bint Ka'b ibn Malik, and she was what?
This is the wife of?
Exactly. So what's the word though? How do you say
Under?
wife of?
Oh, Zoja?
Yeah, but in Arabic, what does it say here?
Yeah, I hear it says under.
Under, exactly. She was under the care of, or under, Ibn Abi Qatada. So again, a feminist would be like, "Oh my God, it's really bad," right? But but it's so number one, there's no fight between the genders; it's a teamwork, right? Like to say there's a fight between the genders is like there's a fight between the imam and the ma'mum, right? Like Jawad keeps like clearing his throat whenever the imam like changes ayah. He's like, ah, so there's a fight between the imam and the ma'mum. Like, no, it's not. There's no fight between the imam and the ma'mum. We're a teamwork, right? There's no jum'ah you know, without the congregation. But there is a hierarchy, right? There's somebody who's in charge. So that's how you say in Arabic, وَكَانَ تَحْتَهُ كَذَا, right? The Prophet ﷺ saying like, I would never even touch a woman, la amlikuha, right? That I don't own, right? In the Hanafi school, you can marry your daughter off by saying malaktukaha, right? I've given her to you in ownership, right? So it's pretty important, right? So again, they have a whole class on that de femina, that there is such thing as hierarchy, and this hierarchy expresses itself in various different expressions, right? And so there is at the end of the day, you have a husband, and he is in charge, and so there's a hierarchy. Just like the parent doesn't have to be shouting at the kid the whole time and telling the kid, do this, don't do this, and the kid has to look down and be miserable. It's not like that. It can be very cheery, but there is when push comes to shove, there is actually a hierarchy, right? And this language here, this is used. وَكَانَتْ تَحْتَ بْنِي أَبِي قَتَادَةَ. It's like, oh yeah, the language is indicative of that, right? Even in English, we say so and so is spoken for, right? Oh, she's spoken for. Like literally, that means her husband speaks for her. That's what it means. She's spoken for. This thing is spoken for, meaning somebody else speaks for her. She's not in charge of herself, right? And obviously, that's a kind of old European system where women are dissolved in their husbands, right? And they become Mr. and Mrs. Farid Dingle, right? They have that. I don't know if used to have that in America, but in England, right? Say Mr. Mr. John Smith, Mr. and Mrs. John Smith, right? Like her name is Mrs. John Smith, right? Legally, he's in charge of her property and all these kind of things. It's not the case in Islam, but in terms of the relationship, there is a hierarchy, right? So أن أبا قتادة دخل عليها فسكبت, she poured له وضوءا, she poured some water. Um, so she poured some water for her father-in-law. فجاءت هرة تشرب منه, and the you know a cat came to drink from it. فأصغى لها الإناء حتى شربت. He Asgha means to listen carefully. Literally means to incline something. He tipped the cup, the thing on its side so that the cat could drink from it. قالت كبشة فرآني أنظر إليه. He noticed that I was looking at him. فقال أتعجبين يا ابنة أخي. Oh my, oh my niece. قلت نعم. قال إن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إنها ليست بنجس إنها من الطوافين عليكم أو الطوافات. Right? It can't possibly be najas because why? Because these are the male and female servants, the tawafin or tawafat that come around you. So just like, just like how you have to interact with your servants, your slaves, they come in and out because they can't be najas. Imagine if your slave was considered najas. That'd be very difficult, right? Similarly, a cat comes in and out. You live in a you live in a society, agrarian society where you have grains in your house, and so you need to have cats in order to eat the rats, etc. And so this is something good, right? So it's the reason why it's not considered najas is because that would be too difficult. It would be umum al-balwa. It'd be too hard to avoid, right? And so it's not the Shafi school, but Qadi Abu Bakr ibn Arabi, his explanation is the same thing applies to dogs. He said a dog that's going to be in and out of the house because it's a work dog, because it's a sheep dog, etc., would be the same thing, right? But that's not the Shafi school, right? The Shafi school says dog and pig filth is not excused even with a haja, right? Even with a difficulty. So if you had a blind dog, for example, right? You're blind and you need to have this functional dog. It's like, oh, fine, but you knock into it and some of its saliva goes in your clothes. It's not excused on the relied upon position in the school, right? A weaker position in school says yes. If you're hunting, the saliva will be excused if there's some kind of need like that. But the relied upon position is no, it's not excused. Pig and dog filth will not be excused, right? Apart from some very, very rare scenarios. Okay. So this also has a kadalil, a semi-proof that a small body of water will become filthy through mere contact, right? So he's looking at this cat, but the cat's default is going to have najas in its mouth, it's going to do these kind of things. Then tells us that the fact that she was shocked, right? And he answered in that way is like, oh, well, the cat is not going to make, i.e. he's telling the cat is not going to make this small body of water filthy, right? Because a cat normally does not make the water look different. But her concern was that the cat is filthy, right? So it tells us also well that the saliva of a cat is going to be pure. So just like the mucus of a human is pure, the saliva of a cat is pure. So we say anything that's not urine or feces or vomit, so it's like sweat or mucus that comes off a pure animal like a cat or a human is going to be pure, right? And he says حدثنا محمد بن عبد الله بن يزيد وأحمد بن شيبان الرملي from Ramallah, Ramli from Ramallah, right in Jerusalem, in Palestine. قال حدثنا سفيان. Which Sufyan is this? He looks like he's narrating from Zayd ibn Aslam, who is in Medina. And he also looks like the gap between our author and Sufyan is one generation. Is that correct? Yeah, one generation. So which Sufyan is this? Is it going to be Sufyan? So he's narrating from somebody in Medina, and he is one generation between our author and him.
Ibn Uyayna.
Ibn Uyayna, right? Sufyan ibn Uyayna. So Sufyan al-Thawri is not going to have a gap. It's going to be much bigger than that, right? And he's not going to be narrating. Sufyan al-Thawri is going to be narrating primarily from Iraqis, right? From Zayd ibn Aslam, عن ibn Wa'lah, عن ibn Abbas يرفعه, ascribing it to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم. قال ابن مقرئ. Where's Ibn Muqri'? So who's Ibn Muqri' here? Maybe that's one of the names of these other persons. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid ibn Muqri', maybe, I don't know. So basically, usually they say they put that in kind of in brackets, meaning there's two versions of this hadith, right? And one person did it like this. So it just sounds Allahu A'lam. So anyway, it seems like it's one of the, because then he's going to say Ibn Shaybani in a second. So presumably Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid, his name is Ibn Muqri'. Right? Allahu A'lam. قال مرة إن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال أيما إهاب, any skin, any hide, دبغ فقد طهر, right? Any hide that is tanned, it becomes pure. And this is the Shafi school, with the exception of dogs and pigs. So we say, it doesn't, at best, tanning can make it as it was when it was alive. And we say a dog and a pig is najas while it's alive. So therefore, the skin, it does not become pure, right? Now, Ibn Mundhir, he says that a dog is not najas. Yes, we have to wash it 7 times, but it's not najas. So does he hold then that that you can tan dog skin, and presumably, and if the reason why a pig is filthy is that is analogous to a dog, and a dog is not filthy according to Ibn Mundhir, does he say then pig skin is pure? Right? Maybe somebody could look it up in the Ishraf or the Al-Awsat by Ibn Mundhir. What does he say about tanning pig skin or dog skin? Wallahu a'lam. قال ابن شيبان قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. So the difference is here, إن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال, or قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. A very small difference. Allahu a'lam. And so these nitpicky differences, you're going to find it down here, not going to find it up at the higher. So basically here, our author's just being very, very careful. So, the further you go down the chain, the more errors there's going to be. So therefore, you start to become more nitpicky and more careful, right? So otherwise, you're going to find lots of. So the riwayah bil ma'na is going to happen here in these kind of generations. Down here, it's not going to happen like that, right? And so he's making this very difference. Inna Nabiy sallallahu alaihi wasallam qal or qala Nabi. He's actually pointing out the difference in these two versions. Wallahu alam. So it seems most likely that this Ibn Shayban, this is Ibn Shayban here. Well, he is obviously Ahmad, and this is Ibn Muqri'. This person is called Ibn Muqri', presumably. Okay. حدثنا أبو يحيى محمد بن سعيد الأطار قال حدثنا إسماعيل بن علية قال حدثنا أبو ريحانة عن سفينة, right, very short chain here, صاحب رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يغتسل بالصاع ويتوضأ بالمد. So he would use half a liter, mud is half a liter, 500 mil to make wudu, and 2 liters to make ghusl. Right, so the Shafis, we say you should use as little as you can while making sure that you can do a proper job. Right, so it changes from person to person, but basically you shouldn't use a lot, but you shouldn't use so little that you're not sure if you can do a good job. ما جاء في السواك قال حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا بشر بن عمر قال حدثنا مالك عن ابن شهاب عن حميد بن عبد الرحمن عن أبي هريرة أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتهم بالسواك مع كل وضوء. Right. Now there's another version, right? مع كل صلاة, right? And so with Shafis, we say both, right? In the Shafi school, we say it is recommended mutlaqan, right, to just walk around doing siwak. Like doing siwak is just an act of worship in itself, specifically when making wudu and specifically for any prayer. Right? في النية في الأعمال قال ابن مقرئ. So this must be the same person. قال ابن المقرئ. So he said here, Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid. Can somebody look him up? Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid ibn Muqri'. It's probably his name. Right. Muhammad ibn Abdullah ibn Yazid ibn Muqri'. Allahu a'lam. حدثنا سفيان, again Sufyan ibn Uyayna, عن يحيى ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, right? This is the Mufti of Medina, right? One of the teachers of Imam Malik. So Imam Malik will narrate this hadith and Sufyan narrate this hadith, right? Imam Bukhari narrates this hadith from Sufyan as well, right? So this is the first hadith, I believe, so he narrates the same hadith, exactly the same hadith. So it's Sufyan ibn Uyayna, but here it's Humaydi, right? Al-Humaydi. So Imam Bukhari narrates it from Al-Humaydi. I mentioned to many of you before, the Musnad of Humaydi is basically the Musnad of Sufyan ibn Uyayna. So if you wanted to, good exercise, look at the marfu' hadiths in the Muwatta, okay, and then put them in a musnad format. Don't put them in chapter format, in a musnad format based on who he's narrating from, and then compare it with the musnad of Humaydi. So you're basically going to see Sufyan's hadith, Malik's hadith. Half of the time they're exactly the same, or more than half the time exactly the same, right? So you're basically seeing two hadiths that both Malik and Sufyan ibn Uyayna are narrating, right? And you kind of just, see there'll be slight differences here and there. Like Imam Shafi will frequently narrate from both of them, the same hadith from both of them, right? Or Bukhari will, right? Thank you, Ibn Muqri. Jazakallah khair. Okay, so حدثنا ابن مقرئ قال حدثنا سفيان ابن عيينة عن يحيى بن سعيد الأنصاري. So we have to not mix him up with Yahya ibn Sa'id what's the other Yahya ibn Sa'id? Great hadith critic in Iraq. Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan. Okay, Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan. So we're going to hear Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan quoted all the time in hadith criticism, right? Sometimes it's called Yahya al-Qattan. Sometimes it's called Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, right? But this is Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Ansari, the Sheikh of Malik and Sufyan ibn Uyayna as well. Al-Ansari, Madini. And Muhammad ibn Ibrahim al-Taymi عن علقمة بن وقاص, right? قال سمعت عمر على المنبر وهو يخبر ذلك عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الأعمال بالنية. Is that how we remember it? إن الأعمال بالنية?
No.
No. So in reality, you're going to have lots of different versions. I'm not familiar with a version without إنما. But usually it's like إنما العمل بالنية, إنما الأعمال بالنيات, right? There's no difference between الأعمال بالنية, العمل بالنية. It's the same thing, right? The deed is based on the intention. Deeds are based on intention. The same thing, right? وإن ما, it doesn't have ما. وإن لكل امرئ ما نوى فمن كانت هجرته إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه ومن كانت هجرته إلى دنيا يصيبها أو امرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. Slightly different, right? So here, this part here is quite different actually, because the other version, what does it say? It says, whoever's hijrah was to Allah and His Messenger, then his hijrah is to Allah and His Messenger. That's like, what do you think about Jawad? I mean, how can I question that? Like, Jawad's Jawad, you know? Like, I can't define him in any more superlative terms, right? So the other one encapsulates that, right? Whoever does hijrah to Allah and His Messenger, there's no way to express it in any more superlative terms than to say it's to Allah's Messenger, right? So here it's kind of missing the point, but again, it's the same version. But it's funny, it says innama, right? So if we can follow all the different chains and find out all of them have innama, then this is clearly a mistake then, right? Like if they all have innama, then it's just a mistake. Particularly because the madar of the hadith, this is the self-same hadith that's going to be in Bukhari. So you're going to find 50,000 people narrating from Sufyan and Malik the similar hadith. In fact, Malik is actually kind of is actually rare as far as I remember actually. So Imam Malik quotes in the Ma'la A'malu Binniyat in the Muwatta, but I don't think he does it musnadan. Somebody could quickly look at it in the musnad look in the Muwatta, إنما الأعمال بالنيات وإنما العمل بالنية. I'm pretty sure he quotes that as a principle, but he doesn't quote it as a hadith. Imam Muhammad Muhammad ibn Hasan Shaybani cites it from Imam Malik. I don't know where though. It's somewhere in the beginning. I just have it here next to me. Now, I asked one of my teachers, Dr. Osama Nimr, and I said, if Muhammad ibn Hassan Shaybani is the only person out of all of these people to narrate the hadith إنما الأعمال بالنيات from Malik, would you accept it? He said, I would. Like that kind of tafarrud will be accepted. Like, yeah, he's the only person to have done that. I'm not sure where he puts it though. إنما الأعمال بالنيات. He doesn't put it in wudu. I'm not sure where it is. So somebody could look it up. Look it up in the Muwatta, where's إنما الأعمال بالنيات or إنما العمل بالنية, etc. And then also look in the Muwatta of Imam Muhammad. Almost certain. I'm just flicking through quickly here. Like might come right at the end. Not sure really where it's going to come in. It might come in. Not sure. But I'm pretty sure I've seen it. Pretty sure I've seen it in the Muwatta Imam Muhammad where he mentions this hadith with a sanad to Imam Malik. Whereas in the Muwatta, he doesn't mention it with a sanad. He just mentions it in passing somewhere, like as a concept that the Prophet had said that. So if somebody could find those, one in the Muwatta, the other one. So when we say the Muwatta, we mean the Muwatta of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, right? We now know actually there's going to be 50,000 Muwattas, right? Because everybody's going to Imam Malik to rate the Muwatta, right? So, but when we say today, when we say the Muwatta, we mean the Muwatta of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, right? Which isn't actually the strongest one, but it's just the most famous one. Right? Khair. So anyway, what's the point then is wudu only counts with intention, prayer only counts with intention, etc. Right? إنما الأعمال العموم. All actions only count if you have a niyyah, right? That's the point. Where's that, Ammar? Imam Muhammad, right? So it's exactly the same hadith. So that's the Muwatta Imam Muhammad. Yeah, so just look at al-amal. Try look at al-amal and then look at al-a'mal. One of the two. Right? Al-amal and al-a'mal. Hmm. So anyway, you can imagine it's a bit of a problem, right? It's a bit of a problem that Imam Muhammad is the only person of all these people to narrate that from from Imam Malik. But again, I asked my Dr. Osam Nimr, he said he would accept it. Right? That Imam Muhammad is good enough and has strong enough relationship with Imam Malik for it to be sound. Allahu Alam. Okay. حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا وهب بن جرير قال حدثنا شعبة ابن حجاج عن سماك بن حرب عن مصعب بن سعد ابن أبي وقاص. Right? This is the son of Sa'd ibn Waqqas. قال. So this hadith here, you will find in if you just have a look at Tirmidhi, you can just compare how Tirmidhi narrates it. Right? So Tirmidhi has more chains than this. Right? This is actually, I think, the first hadith in Tirmidhi, if I'm not mistaken. Right? He has more chains. So he goes, but the madar of the hadith is Simak ibn Harb. And I don't think he narrates it from Shu'bah, unless I'm mistaken. But he has a totally different chain for it. So I'm pretty sure the madar of it is all the chains merge around Simak ibn Harb. حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال. Yeah, his chains are totally different, right? So his chains, Tirmidhi's chains are totally different, but the madar of them is it does not, it skips Shu'bah. So he says حدثنا قتيبة بن سعيد قال أخبرنا عبوان عن سماك بن حرب وحدثنا هناد قال حدثنا وكيع عن yeah, and Israel and Simak. So basically, Shu'bah, even though he's amazing, he's not the only person to write this hadith. Okay, uh, other people narrate the same same hadith, right? So somebody was asking yesterday about memorizing hadith. Uh, there we go. Like I started trying to memorize Tirmidhi, didn't get too far, but I basically know that chain, right? So that's actually quite useful, right? So I personally, I'm not saying that in the world, like I'm trying to give advice to Tulab ilm, but personally found it useful, right? Sheikh, not a very perfect example, but like Sheikh Hamza Kanamali, who was studying the Muwatta of Imam with Sheikh Hassan Hito, who my brother told me today lives down the road from him. Um, but anyway, um, he hadn't memorized the Muwatta. He hadn't memorized it like 100 perfect%, but like basically memorize it for the next day, if that kind of makes sense. So being familiar with Muwatta is pretty important. And Tirmidhi. Um, okay. حدثنا شعبة عن سماك بن حرب. So the madar is سماك بن حرب from مصعب ibn سعد ibn أبي وقاص قال دخل الناس يثنون على ابن عامر عند موته فقال ابن عمر أما إني لست بأغشكم لك. Right, I believe I don't, it means I don't know you the best, I believe. Does it mention it here? أغشكم. Does it mention it? جزاكم خير. There we go. Same issue. Thank you. Right? So let's just read it. So it says قال السيوطي في تنوير الحوالك. Right? In his commentary on the Muwatta. في موطأ محمد بن حسن عن مالك أحاديث يسيرة زائدة على ما في سائر الموطئات منها حديث إنما الأعمال بالنية وبذلك يتبين صحة قول من عزي روايته إلى الموطأ آه ووهم من خطأه في ذلك. Right? جزاكم الله خير. Right? So this is a nice thing. One of the nice things is, for example, when you say something and you realize you're right, you know. So not myself, right? So my judgment doesn't mean anything there. But like when I asked my teacher, right, and he says, yeah, I'd accept it. So now my teacher's personal opinion is that he would accept he would accept Malik Muhammad narrating that. And then Imam Suyuti said the same thing. That's pretty cool, right? So when you get to the stage where you say things that your teachers would have said, right, then it means you're starting to know stuff, right? Like you actually understand things, right? Where you like, you ask one of your teachers, what's the hukm on this? Oh, I guess it's this. And then they find that's the same as Shabra Malisi said. Well, that's the same as so and so, right? And then it's like, yeah, you're starting to understand things. It's not just guesswork. You know what I'm saying? Like in the beginning, I almost like guesswork because you really don't know what's going on. And it's like a magic that like, people kind of, it's not really magic. Like a lot of it is not that, I'm not a hadith scholar, but I remember once I looked at a hadith and I was like, this hadith seems ma'lul. I know it's ma'lul. And then I looked it up and I found Ibn Abi Hatim al-Razi saying the same thing. It's like, there we go. Thank you very much. Right? Meaning it's not that I'm a scholar, but it's like I'm understanding the system, Like when you kind of see something, then you see this great scholar, so that's exactly what I was thinking. It's like, there we go. I'm understanding things. We're going in the right direction, right? Okay. So أغشكم, I don't see that here. Can somebody where's the word أغشكم? So this is not the version that's in this version is not in in Tirmidhi. It doesn't have this part. It just says quotes the hadith. That's all. So it doesn't have this thing. I'm not sure what this means. Aghashikum. Lastu bi aghashi. I'm not sure. Ghashish. Not sure what that means. Oh, I'm not the cheapest of you. Ghish is to trick somebody. Lastu bi aghashihim lak. right? I'm not the cheat. I'm not the most. I am not the most. The most cheatest of them to you, right? And I'm not sure what the point is here. Why that would be relevant, and what's that got to do with death? He says, لكني سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول لا يقبل الله صلاة بغير طهور ولا صدقة من غلول. Right? The Prophet said, no prayer is accepted without purity, and no charity is accepted from ill-gotten gains. Right? So ghish is to cheat somebody. I am not the most. Lest to be a Russian nas lak. I'm not going to be one of these people who just cheat you and not give you a fair information. By the way, this is the case. Right? So how is this related to somebody dying? I don't know. Allahu a'lam. And he says, حدثنا أحمد ibn Yusuf. So the point is you can't pray without purity. But what do you mean by purity? Do you mean purity as in wudu, or do you mean purity as in or do you mean purity as in najasa on you, right? And what do you mean by la yaqbal? Do you mean it's not accepted, but it's valid, right? Wallahu a'lam, right? So Allah does not accept, the default is not valid. Any prayer without any, so bi ghayri tuhurin. This is not am, this is the problem. So if it was بِغَيْرِ طُهُورٍ, that means Allah does not accept any prayer without any purification. So if you have some purification, then maybe Allah does accept it, right? So you cannot use this as a dalil, clear dalil against the Malikis. So some of the Malikis, they say that purity is from filth is not a condition for prayer, right? So it's generally obligatory to remove filth from you, but the prayer will count if you had filth on you, right? So here the issue is basically it's not actually a. So if we said بغير الطهور, without the purity, that'd be okay. But it says بغير طهور, without a purity. Well, which purity? Right? And I believe there's another version. Tirmidhi mentions two versions. It says إلا بطهور, except with purity, with a purity. Well, which purity? Do you mean purity of ritual purity, or do you mean purity of your physical purity, right? So it's kind of clear in general, but it's not 100% clear, right? And you can't use it as a 100% proof against those who say otherwise. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم, do wash this, wash this, wash this. It doesn't say purify yourselves, right? وثيابك فطهر, similarly, وثيابك فطهر tells us وقلبك فطهر, right? Look at the different tafsirs in the وثيابك فطهر in مدثر, right? Was it مزمل? مدثر, right? I'm mixing the two up now. But anyway, one of the two. Yeah, وثيابك فطهر, and your heart purify, right? Purify your heart, okay? جزاك خير عمار, right? In مدثر. So, and وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, and purify your heart, right? It's not a clear proof either, right? And that's the benefit of Jahili poetry, right? What was the first poem we did in the Mu'allaqat? Imra al-Qais. فَصُلِّي ثِيَابِي عَنْ ثِيَابِكَ تَنْسُلِي, or فَتْسُلِّي ثِيَابِي عَنْ ثِيَابِكِ تَنْسُلِي, right? So he tells her, Fatima mahlan ba'da hadha tadalluli, right? Fatima, let's forget this messing around now, right? Like if you're going to say goodbye to me, say goodbye to me. Stop playing a game, right? And take your heart away from my heart. Fasulli thiyabi and thiyabiki tensuli. And you can just go on your merry way. Like let's just break up and make it finished, done with, right? So i.e. take your heart away from my heart, khalas, right? So why do we study Jahili poetry? To understand the primary texts. Okay. حدثنا أحمد بن يوسف قال حدثنا عبد الرزاق ابن همام الهمام الصنعاني. Right? So this is the author of the Musannaf Abd al-Razzaq, these two really important books, Musannaf Abd al-Razzaq and Musannaf Ibn Abi Shayba. Right? Really important books. قال أخبرنا معمر, right? And it's worth noting, right? What percent of all traces of woolly mammoths have you seen in your life? Like, if you think about all the woolly mammoths that ever existed, like what percent have you seen? If you can imagine every single woolly mammoth that ever walked on planet Earth, what percent of their footprints, hair, tusks have you seen? Personally, as a non-scientist or non-researcher in those kind of things, what percent? Like basically zero, right? Like 0.0001%. Okay. Okay, what percent do you think we have over the whole world, like traces and things left over? If you got like all the bones that we have, all the tusks that we have frozen in the ice, all the footsteps, all the this, all the bodies that were stuck in mud, like what percent? Again, we're talking about a very, very small percentage. So the default is that the traces of things of the past do not remain. So when you find, for example, Abdul Razzaq Sanani, he has like this 11 volume book that exists today. You can bet your bottom dollar that he probably had a library, right? Like he probably, the kind of knowledge he had was like a library. And all that reached us was a very small amount, right? Imam Muhammad Shafi'i, he said, I went to Imam Hassan Shaybani and he came back with, I don't know, like 3 or 4 camel loads of books. So where are these books then? Don't know. Don't have them. Lost, gone, something, right? It's very common. So when you find a book, a scholar today, like Imam Bukhari, 9 volume Tarikh al-Kabir, right? Tarikh al-Kabir by Imam Bukhari. You can imagine he probably wrote like 50, 60, 70, 80 volumes, right? Tafsir al-Tabari is a summary and it's like in how many volumes, right? So you could imagine Tabari, he probably wrote and compiled, I don't know, 1,000 volumes or something like that. Who knows? And then from that, he has edited thing that he has for you to read is something small. Abu Dawood, same thing. Something like I don't know what they say, like he selected these 5,000 hadith in Abu Dawood from, I don't know, 100,000 hadith or something like that. So they have so you can just imagine, just make a comparison. What if you have a lot from that person, they probably had a lot more, right? That's not always the case, right? Because if you go into later history, like does did Imam Nawawi, for example, have like 1 million volumes and only so and so has reached us? And that's not the truth. But when you go back to that kind of date, right? This is the teacher of Imam Ahmad, right? Abdul Razak al-San'ani is a teacher of Imam Ahmad, like it's really old. So there's a lot of material that is clearly not has not reached us, right, from him. Um, قال أخبرنا معمر ibn Rashid. Like this is Ma'mar Rashid. He has a seerah. We mentioned to you many of you before. There's a seerah that's just come out. I'm pretty sure it's in English. Ma'mar ibn Rashid is seerah, and he has the Jami'. And again, that's been printed recently. We mentioned to you, many of you as well, that Sheikh Ma'bad and Sheikh, what's his name? Something Ma'bad. I can't forget his name now. There's a sheikh in Egypt, very famous sheikh, Ma'bad. The name's escaping me now. That he and others did the tahqiq of it recently. And so what you find is the contents of Ma'mar's Jami' is inside the Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, but not the whole thing. So people always used to think that the Jami' of Ma'mar was this like section at the end of the Musannaf Abdul Razzaq, like he had basically put the whole book inside his book, right? In reality, it's not. It's bigger, right? And then this is Hammam ibn Munabbih, brother of Wahb ibn Munabbih, and he has the author of the As-Sahifa As-Sahiha, I think it's called. As-Sahifa As-Sahiha. Right? He wrote this book, which is basically hadiths that he had narrated from Abu Hurairah. Right? And that's a book. قال أحمد معبد عبدك الشيخ عبد الكريم جزاهم خير زفر. Right. هذا ما حدثنا أبو هريرة عن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تقبل صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. Right. So here this is clearer if you break your wudu until you make wudu. Right. And notice أحدث means to do something. When you do something, it's kind of a kinaya. Right. أحدث can also mean to do something bad. Right. You did something bad. Right. Don't do something. Right. It's like somebody saying you pray. The kid just did something, so he needs to go and wash, right? It's almost like a kinaya, right? أحدث, to do something. Okay, inshallah, okay, one last. Okay, let's stop here, inshallah, because we have another class. Inshallah, there's going to be people joining. So please, if you're able to join, we're going to be reading the last 13 or so lines of the Alfiya. And so please join if you can, if you've seen on the group. Inshallah, please join, inshallah. Even if you're not in the group, inshallah. Inshallah, go in, inshallah. Okay, we'll stop here. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.